Jake Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he crawled out from under the power coupling in Section 12. The USS Horizon was humanity's biggest and best spaceship, but even the best ships needed constant repairs. Jake had been fixing things on spaceships for 8 years now, and he knew every pipe, wire, and bolt on this vessel better than anyone else. He checked his watch and saw it was almost time for the big meeting. The whole crew had been talking about it for weeks. Today was the day they would meet aliens for the first time in human history. Real aliens, not just signals from space or strange readings on sensors. The Kirathi had sent a message saying they wanted to meet and talk peace. Jake pulled his toolkit together and started walking toward the elevator. His left leg hurt a little, the way it always did when he worked too long in cramped spaces. The doctor said the nerve damage from his childhood accident would never fully heal, but the daily medicine helped keep the pain down. He had been taking those little blue pills every morning for 20 years now. The ship felt different today. There was excitement in the air, but also fear. Jake could see it in the faces of the crew members he passed in the hallways. Everyone was wearing their best uniforms, their hair neat and their boots polished. Even the walls seemed to shine brighter than usual. Captain Lisa Crawford's voice came over the ship's speakers. "All crew members, please report to your stations. Our guests will arrive in 30 minutes. Department heads to the main conference room immediately." Jake was not a department head. He was just a maintenance worker, one of 40 people who kept the ship running while the important people made the big decisions. But he liked it that way. No one bothered him, and he could work in peace. He made his way to the lower decks where his small room was located. The corridors here were narrower and darker than the upper levels where the officers lived. Jake shared this space with the other maintenance crew, the cooks, and the junior scientists. They called it the basement even though they were in space. Jake's roommate Kevin Park was sitting on his bed staring at his communication device. Kevin worked in the communications department and always knew what was happening before everyone else. "Have you seen the pictures?" Kevin asked without looking up. "What pictures?" Jake sat down on his own bed and started unlacing his work boots. Kevin turned his device toward Jake. On the screen was an image of a tall, beautiful woman with pale blue skin and white hair. Her eyes looked like pieces of ice, cold and bright. She wore a long silver dress that seemed to float around her body. "That's their leader," Kevin said. "Her name is Zara Neth. She's coming aboard our ship in 20 minutes. Jake stared at the picture. The alien woman was beautiful, but something about her made him feel cold just looking at her. "She looks almost human." "Almost," Kevin agreed. "But the science team says her body temperature is way below freezing, like she should be dead kind of cold. They think that's normal for her species." Jake nodded and put his boots away. He took out his medicine bottle and swallowed his daily pill with a sip of water. The little blue pill was so much a part of his routine that he barely thought about it anymore. "You want to watch the meeting?" Kevin asked. "I can put it on the big screen in the recreation room." Jake shook his head. "I've got work to do. The backup power system in Section 15 has been making strange noises." Kevin laughed. "You're going to miss the most important moment in human history to fix a noisy machine." "Someone has to keep the lights on," Jake said with a smile. 30 minutes later, Jake was deep in the ship's mechanical areas when he felt the horizon shake slightly. That meant another ship had docked with them. The aliens were here. Jake tried to focus on his work, but he kept thinking about the cold-looking woman in the picture. Something about her bothered him, though he could not say what. He had learned to trust his feelings about people over the years. His accident as a child had made him different, more sensitive to things other people missed. The backup power system was louder than it should be, but Jake could not find anything wrong with it. All the readings were normal. Maybe it was just the stress of the day making everything seem worse than it was. Jake was checking the main power coupling when he heard screaming. It was not the kind of screaming you heard when someone was excited or happy. This was the sound of pure terror, coming from somewhere far above him. Jake dropped his tools and ran toward the nearest elevator. The elevator seemed to take forever to reach the upper decks. When the doors finally opened, Jake stepped out into chaos. Crew members were running in every direction, their faces white with fear. Some were crying. Others were shouting into their communication devices. What's happening? Jake grabbed the arm of a young science officer who was running past. The woman looked at him with wild eyes. They're dead, she said. They're all dead. She killed them all. Who's dead? Who killed them? The captain, the ambassador, everyone in the meeting. She touched them and they turned to ice. Real ice, like statues. The woman pulled free from Jake's grip and kept running. Jake felt his blood turn cold. He ran toward the main conference room, pushing through crowds of panicked people. The closer he got, the more the temperature seemed to drop. His breath began to make little clouds in the air. When Jake reached the conference room, he stopped and stared in horror. The room was full of ice sculptures that had once been human beings. Captain Lisa Crawford stood frozen at the head of the table, her hand extended as if she had been reaching for something. Ambassador Helen Brooks was a block of ice near the door, her face locked in the expression of surprise and fear. There were 12 ice statues in total. Jake recognized each face. These had been the best and brightest people on the ship, the leaders and decision-makers. Now they were nothing but frozen decorations, but the aliens were gone. Jake could see through the big windows that their silver ship was moving away from the horizon, getting smaller and smaller until it disappeared among the stars. Jake heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Dr. Susan Walsh, the ship's doctor, and 2 other crew members. Dr. Walsh was a tough woman in her 50s who had seen everything during her long career. But even she looked shaken. How many survivors? Jake asked. We're still counting, Dr. Walsh said. But it looks like everyone who was in this room is gone, plus about 30 others who were nearby when it happened. What about the rest of the crew? Most people were at their stations or in their quarters. We think there are maybe 40 or 50 of us left alive. Jake looked back at the frozen figures. Why did they leave? If they wanted to kill us all, why not finish the job? Dr. Walsh shook her head. I don't know. Maybe they got what they came for. Maybe this was always the plan. Jake thought about the picture Kevin had shown him. The cold, beautiful woman with ice blue eyes. Had she done this? Had she turned all these people into ice statues with just a touch? We need to get everyone together, Jake said. Find out who's still alive and figure out what to do next. You're right, Dr. Walsh agreed. But Jake, there's something else. We picked up a message from their ship before they left. They're coming back. Jake felt his stomach drop. When? Soon. Jake spent the next 2 hours moving through the ship, looking for survivors. The USS Horizon felt like a tomb now. Every corridor seemed colder than before, and Jake's footsteps echoed in the empty hallways. He found crew members hiding in storage rooms, medical bays, and personal quarters. Most of them were scared and confused. By evening, they had counted 43 survivors. Dr. Susan Walsh had set up a meeting place in the ship's dining hall, far from the frozen conference room. Jake sat at a table with the other survivors, looking at faces he knew but had never really talked to before. Without the officers and department heads, the remaining crew was mostly maintenance workers, junior scientists, medical staff, and support personnel. We need to make some decisions, Dr. Walsh said. She had taken charge because she was the highest-ranking survivor. First, we need to understand what happened and why we're still alive. Kevin Park raised his hand. I was monitoring communications. During the attack, I recorded everything. He activated a small device and played the audio from the meeting. Jake listened to the voices of Captain Crawford and Ambassador Brooks as they welcomed the aliens aboard. Then came the screaming and the sound of panic. But there was something else, a voice speaking in a strange language that sounded like wind blowing through ice caves. That's the alien leader, Kevin said. Zara Neth. She was saying something, but our computers can't translate it. Dr. Walsh looked worried. I've been thinking about why some of us survived. Jake, you were in the lower decks during the meeting, right? Jake nodded. I was working on the backup power system in Section 15. And Kevin, where were you? In the communications room, monitoring the meeting from there. Dr. Walsh turned to the others. Everyone who survived was either far from the main conference area or behind sealed doors. I think distance and barriers protected us somehow. A young woman named Lisa Chen, who worked in the ship's kitchen, spoke up. But why did they leave? If they wanted to kill us all, they could have searched the whole ship. Before anyone could answer, Kevin's communication device started beeping. He looked at the screen and his face went pale. There's an incoming message. It's from them. The main screen in the dining hall flickered to life. The beautiful alien woman from the photograph appeared, but now Jake could see her clearly in motion. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow with its own light, and her ice-colored eyes looked directly at the camera as if she could see each of them personally. When Zara Neth spoke, her voice was like crystal breaking. The ship's computer translated her words into English, but the translation sounded cold and mechanical. Humans of the vessel Horizon. I am Zara Neth, first of the Kirathi. You have been tested and found wanting. Your leaders fell to my touch as all inferior beings do. This is the way of things. Jake felt his hands form fists. The alien was talking about his friends and colleagues like they were nothing more than insects. Zara Neth continued. For 10,000 years, my people have traveled the stars, testing the species we encounter. Those who can resist my touch prove themselves worthy of life. Those who cannot are removed from existence. No species has ever passed this test. Dr. Walsh stood up. She's saying this was all planned. It wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. They came here to test us. On the screen, Zara Neth's expression became colder. Your kind shows promise. In some ways. Your ships are well built and your courage is notable. But you failed the only test that matters. Tomorrow, we return to finish what we began. Use your remaining time to prepare your souls for the ice. The transmission ended, leaving the dining hall in shocked silence. Jake broke the silence first. How many ships do they have? Kevin checked his instruments. Long-range sensors show at least 12 vessels approaching our position. They'll be here in 18 hours. We have to run, said Lisa Chen. We can take the escape pods and scatter in different directions. No, Dr. Walsh said firmly. The escape pods don't have faster-than-light engines. They'll catch us easily, and even if some of us escaped, they'd just hunt us down later. Jake stood up and walked to the front of the room. Everyone looked at him, waiting. He was not used to being the center of attention, but someone had to say what they were all thinking. We can't run and we can't hide, Jake said. But maybe we can fight. Some of the survivors laughed, but not in a happy way. Fight? Said Tony Martinez, one of the other maintenance workers. Jake, these aliens just killed our best people with a touch. What are we supposed to do against that? Jake looked around the room. We know this ship better than they do. We can use that. For the next several hours, Jake worked with the other survivors to prepare the USS Horizon for battle. It was not going to be a normal kind of fight with weapons and explosions. Instead, they were going to turn their own ship into a trap. Jake used his knowledge of the ship's systems to create barriers and obstacles. He rerouted power cables to create electric fences in key corridors. He modified the lighting system so they could make areas completely dark or blindingly bright at the touch of a button. He even rigged some of the maintenance robots to act as mobile distractions. Dr. Walsh worked with the medical team to study the frozen bodies, trying to understand how the aliens' power worked. Kevin and his communications people tried to learn more about the approaching ships, but Jake knew they were just buying time. Even with all their preparations, they were 43 scared humans against 12 alien ships. The math did not look good. The Kirathi ships arrived exactly when they had promised. Jake watched from the bridge as the sleek silver vessels surrounded the horizon. They moved like fish swimming through water, beautiful and deadly. Incoming transmission, Kevin announced. Zara Neth appeared on the screen again. Humans, you will open your docking bays and allow us aboard. Resistance will only make your deaths more painful. Dr. Walsh stepped forward. Why are you doing this? What did we ever do to you? The alien woman's ice-blue eyes showed no emotion at all. You exist. That is enough. Your species is weak and therefore has no right to live. This is the natural order. Natural order? Jake couldn't help himself from speaking up. You're talking about murder. Zara Neth looked directly at Jake through the screen. I am talking about survival of the strongest. Your people could not resist my touch. That proves they were inferior. It is that simple. The transmission ended, and immediately the horizon shook as the alien ships began docking procedures. They were coming aboard whether the humans wanted them to or not. Jake turned to the others. Everyone to positions. Remember the plan. Stay together, watch each other's backs, and don't let them touch you. As the survivors scattered to their hiding places throughout the ship, Jake made his way toward the main docking bay. He had volunteered for the most dangerous job of all. He was going to try to slow down the aliens long enough for the others to get into position. Jake crouched behind a maintenance panel near the docking bay entrance, watching as the airlock cycled open. The first thing that came through was cold. The temperature dropped so fast that Jake could see his breath in the air. Then came the Kirathi themselves. They looked like humans, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too pale, moving too smoothly. And their eyes all had that same ice blue color as their leader. Jake counted 12 of them as they entered the ship. At the back of the group walked Zara Neth, herself, even more beautiful and terrifying in person than she had been on the screen. Jake activated the first trap. The lights in the corridor went out, plunging the area into total darkness. He heard surprised voices speaking in the alien language. Then he activated the second trap. Electric barriers sparked to life, cutting the group in half. But the aliens adapted quickly. Within minutes, they had found ways around his obstacles. Jake realized that his clever traps might buy them time, but not much. As he crawled through the maintenance tunnels trying to stay ahead of the search parties, Jake heard screaming from other parts of the ship. The aliens were finding the other survivors. His friends were dying, and there was nothing he could do about it. Jake reached the central engineering section, which was supposed to be their final meeting place. He found Kevin Park there, but Kevin was not moving. He had been turned into ice just like the others. Dr. Walsh was still alive, hiding behind the main power console. When she saw Jake, her face showed relief and despair at the same time. "They got everyone else," she whispered. "It's just us now." Jake heard footsteps in the corridor outside. The aliens had found them. "Jake," Dr. Walsh said quietly, "I've been thinking about why you and I are still alive. We were both far from the main meeting, yes, but there might be something else. Something about our biology." "What do you mean?" "Your medication. The pills you take every day. They change your brain chemistry, right? And I've been exposed to so many different medicines and treatments over the years that my body chemistry is probably different from normal humans too." The footsteps were getting closer. "It's just a theory," Dr. Walsh continued. "But maybe the reason we've survived this long is because we're different somehow. Maybe her power doesn't work the same way on us." The door to engineering opened and Zaraneth walked in. Zaraneth stood in the doorway like a vision from a nightmare. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow in the dim light of the engineering room, and frost began forming on the metal walls around her. Jake could feel the temperature dropping with each step she took toward them. Behind her came 6 other Kirathi warriors, all tall and beautiful in the same cold way as their leader. They moved without making any sound, like ghosts floating across the floor. Dr. Walsh grabbed Jake's arm. "Run," she whispered. But there was nowhere to go. The engineering room had only one exit, and the aliens were blocking it. Jake and Dr. Walsh backed up against the main power console, trapped. Zara Neth smiled, and it was the most frightening thing Jake had ever seen. Her teeth were perfectly white, and her breath came out in clouds of freezing mist. "The last 2 humans," she said in her crystal-breaking voice. "You have hidden well, but all games must end." "Why are you doing this?" Dr. Walsh demanded. "We came in peace. We wanted to be friends." "Friends?" Zara Neth laughed, and the sound made ice crystals form in the air. "Inferior species do not have friends. They have masters or they have death. You have chosen death." Jake stepped in front of Dr. Walsh. He was scared, but he was also angry. This alien had killed his friends, his captain, everyone he had worked with for years. If he was going to die, he would not die begging. "You want to kill us?" Jake said. "Then do it yourself. Don't hide behind your soldiers." Zaraneth's ice-blue eyes focused on Jake with interest. Brave words from a creature about to become a statue. Very well. I will grant you the honor of dying by my own hand. She walked toward Jake, raising her pale hand. Dr. Walsh tried to pull Jake back, but he stood his ground. He thought about his childhood accident, about all the years of pain and medication, about how he had always felt different from everyone else. Maybe being different was not such a bad thing after all. Zaraneth placed her hand on Jake's chest. Nothing happened. Jake felt the cold touch of her skin through his work shirt, but that was all. No ice formed on his body. No freezing pain shot through his veins. He just stood there looking into her shocked face. Zaraneth pulled her hand back and stared at it as if it had betrayed her. Then she reached out and touched Jake again, this time on his bare arm. Still nothing. She pressed both hands against his face, holding them there for several seconds. Jake felt cold, but he did not turn into ice. Impossible, Zaraneth whispered. The other Kyrathi warriors moved closer, their faces showing the same shock as their leader. One of them spoke in their strange language, and Zaraneth answered back in sharp, angry sounds. Dr. Walsh stared at Jake in amazement. Your theory was right, Jake said to her quietly. Something about my body chemistry makes me immune. But Dr. Walsh was not looking at him anymore. She was looking at Zaraneth, who had stepped back and was speaking rapidly to her warriors. The alien leader's perfect composure was cracking. For the first time since they had met her, she looked uncertain. Do you understand what this means? Dr. Walsh whispered to Jake. In 10,000 years, no one has ever been immune to her power. Their entire belief system is based on the idea that her touch is absolute. Jake nodded. He was beginning to understand that his immunity was more than just a lucky accident. It was a crack in the foundation of everything the Kyrathi believed about themselves. Zaraneth turned back to Jake, her ice-blue eyes now burning with something that might have been fear. What are you? She demanded. I'm human, Jake said simply. No. Humans die when I touch them. All beings die when I touch them. It is the law of nature. Jake looked around the room at the Kyrathi warriors. They were all staring at him like he was some kind of monster. Maybe your law is wrong. Zaraneth's face went through several expressions, confusion, anger, and something that looked almost like panic. She turned to Dr. Walsh and reached out to touch her. No! Jake jumped between them, grabbing Zaraneth's wrist. The alien leader froze, not because of her own power, but because of shock. Jake was touching her, skin to skin, and nothing was happening to either of them. She tried to pull away, but Jake held on. You want to kill her, you have to go through me, Jake said. For a long moment, they stood there like that, the human maintenance worker holding the wrist of the most feared being in the galaxy. The Kyrathi warriors looked to their leader for orders, but Zaraneth seemed unable to speak. Finally, she jerked her arm free from Jake's grip. Kill the other human, she ordered her warriors in English, apparently wanting Jake to understand. But take this one alive. I must understand how this is possible. The warriors moved toward Dr. Walsh, but Jake stepped in their way again. You want her? You have to kill me first, and we both know you can't do that. One of the warriors raised a weapon that looked like a crystal spear, but Zaraneth stopped him with a gesture. No, do not harm the immune one. We need him. Dr. Walsh moved up beside Jake. If you can't kill Jake and Jake won't let you kill me, then we have what you might call a problem. Zaraneth's perfect face twisted with frustration. Jake could see her mind working, trying to find a solution to a puzzle she had never faced before. Her entire life, her entire species' existence, was built around the absolute nature of her deadly power. Jake's immunity did not just threaten her physically, it threatened everything she was. This changes nothing, Zaraneth said finally, but her voice sounded less certain than before. One immune human does not make your species worthy of survival. The rest of your people still died from my touch? Did they? Jake asked. Or are there others like me that you just haven't found yet? The question hit Zaraneth like a physical blow. Jake could see her considering the possibility that there might be more immune humans, maybe many more. If that were true, then her test was meaningless. Her entire worldview would collapse. "Bring them both," Zaraneth ordered her warriors. "We return to the fleet. The council must see this for themselves." As the Karathi warriors surrounded them, Dr. Walsh leaned close to Jake. "What's your plan?" she whispered. "I don't have one yet," Jake admitted, "but I'm working on it." The aliens escorted them through the corridors of the USS Horizon. Jake tried not to look at the ice statues they passed, people he had known and worked with, now frozen forever. But he also tried to memorize everything he saw about the Karathi, the way they moved, the way they communicated, the technology they carried. If he was going to find a way out of this, he needed to understand his enemies. They reached the docking bay where the alien ship waited. It was even more beautiful up close than it had looked from a distance. The hull seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. Jake could see no seams or joints. It was as if the entire ship had been grown rather than built. As they walked up the boarding ramp, Jake felt the temperature drop even further. The inside of the Karathi ship was like stepping into a freezer. His breath came out in thick clouds and he could feel the cold seeping through his clothes. The ship's interior was all smooth curves and crystalline surfaces. Everything glowed with the same soft light as the hull, creating an effect that was both beautiful and alien. Jake had never seen anything like it. They were taken to what looked like a holding area, a room with walls that seemed to be made of ice, though they were warm to the touch. Zaraneth left them there with 2 guards while she went somewhere else on the ship. Dr. Walsh sat down on what might have been a bench and looked around the strange room. "Jake, I need to tell you something. Before the aliens came back, I was studying the frozen bodies of our crew. I think I understand how her power works." Jake sat down beside her. "What did you find?" "It's not really ice," Dr. Walsh said. "It's something else. Something that mimics the effects of freezing but works much faster. It targets the nervous system first, shutting down all electrical activity in the brain within seconds. That's why the victims don't have time to scream or fight back. But it doesn't work on me." "Right. And I think I know why. Your medication affects the electrical patterns in your brain. The nerve damage from your accident created pathways that don't exist in normal humans. Somehow, that combination makes you immune to her power." Jake thought about this. "So it's not just me. Anyone with the right kind of brain chemistry could be immune. Theoretically, yes, but Jake, there's something else. I think the immunity works both ways." "What do you mean?" Dr. Walsh lowered her voice even more. "I think you might be able to disrupt her power completely. Not just resist it, but actually interfere with her ability to use it on others." Before Jake could ask what she meant, the door to their holding room opened. Zaraneth entered, followed by several other Karathi who looked older and more elaborately dressed than the warriors they had seen before. "The council wishes to see the immune human," Zaraneth announced. Her voice was back to its cold, controlled tone, but Jake could see uncertainty in her eyes. As the aliens escorted him from the room, Jake looked back at Dr. Walsh. She mouthed the words, "Be careful," and gave him an encouraging nod. Jake walked down the crystal corridors of the alien ship, his mind racing. He was about to face the leaders of a species that had destroyed countless civilizations over thousands of years. But for the first time since this nightmare began, he felt something other than fear. He felt hope. The Karathi Council Chamber was the most beautiful and terrifying place Jake had ever seen. The walls were made of what looked like frozen starlight, curved and flowing like waves in the ocean. In the center of the room stood a circle of 12 tall chairs carved from single pieces of crystal. Each chair held a Karathi council member, all of them staring at Jake with their cold blue eyes. Zaraneth took her place in the largest chair, which seemed to be made of ice that never melted. The other council members were older than her, their pale skin marked with lines that might have been age or might have been something else entirely. Jake stood in the middle of the circle, feeling very small and very human. But he kept his back straight and his chin up. These aliens might be able to destroy planets, but they could not touch him. One of the older council members spoke in the Kairathi language. His voice sounded like wind howling through caves. Zaraneth translated for Jake. Council leader Vexnoth asks if you understand what you have done, she said. Your immunity challenges everything we know about the natural order. Jake looked around the circle of ancient faces. Maybe your natural order is wrong. Another council member, this one female with white hair that floated around her head like she was underwater, spoke up. Zaraneth translated again. Council member Lise Vera says that is impossible. For 10,000 years we have tested thousands of species across the galaxy. None have ever resisted the ice touch. This is proof that we are meant to rule. Or maybe, Jake said slowly, it just means you've been bullies for 10,000 years. The temperature in the room dropped so fast that Jake could see his breath. Several council members stood up from their chairs, their faces showing anger. But Jake noticed something else in their expressions. Fear. Zaraneth raised her hand for silence. The human speaks foolishly, but we must understand how his immunity is possible. Our entire civilization depends on the absolute nature of the ice touch. Jake realized this was his chance. These aliens were afraid of what his immunity meant. He could use that fear. What if I told you there are others like me? Jake said. What if I told you that humans have been developing immunity to your power for generations? It was a lie, but Jake said it with confidence. He watched as the council members exchanged worried looks. Zaraneth leaned forward in her ice throne. That is impossible, she said. We tested your leaders, they all died. Did you test everyone? Jake asked. There are billions of humans on Earth, millions more on colony worlds. How many of them might be immune like me? The oldest council member, whose skin was so pale it was almost transparent, spoke in a voice like breaking glass. Zaraneth's translation came out strained and uncertain. Ancient Kolthes asks if the human speaks truth. If there are many immune ones, then our tests mean nothing. If our tests mean nothing, then we have no right to judge other species. Jake saw his opening. That's right. Your whole system is based on a lie. You're not superior beings chosen by fate to rule the galaxy. You're just aliens with a scary trick that doesn't work on everyone. The council chamber erupted in angry voices speaking the Kairathi language. Some council members stood up and pointed at Jake. Others turned to argue with each other. Zaraneth shouted for order, but it took several minutes for the chaos to calm down. When quiet returned, Jake noticed that the council was divided. Some members looked angry and wanted to continue their old ways. Others looked troubled, as if Jake's words had awakened doubts they had been hiding for a long time. The young female council member with floating white hair spoke again. This time she spoke in English, her accent thick but understandable. I am Lise Vera. I have long wondered if our path is correct. We destroy so many beautiful civilizations, so much art and music and knowledge lost forever. If the human speaks truth, if there are others who resist the ice touch, then perhaps we should reconsider our methods. An older male council member snarled something in Kairathi. Zaraneth translated with obvious reluctance. Council member Dexroth says that doubt is weakness. He says we should kill the immune human and continue our mission as we always have. But you can't kill me, Jake pointed out. And that's the problem, isn't it? Your whole religion is based on the idea that you can kill anyone with a touch. I prove that's not true. Ancient Kolthes spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. When Zaraneth translated, her own voice shook. The Ancient One says that if one human can resist the ice touch, others might develop the same ability. Over time, whole populations could become immune. Our power would become useless. Jake nodded. Exactly. Evolution doesn't stop just because you want it to. Humans adapt and survive. It's what we do best. The council chamber fell silent. Jake could see the weight of his words settling on the alien leaders like a heavy blanket. Their entire civilization was built on the belief that they were superior to all other life in the galaxy. Jake's existence challenged that belief at its very foundation. Lise Vera stood up from her crystal chair. I propose we halt all testing operations until we understand more about this immunity. We should study the human, learn how his resistance works. No. Dexroth slammed his hand on the arm of his chair, creating a sound like thunder. We do not change our ways for one abnormal creature. We continue as we always have. The council began arguing again, but Jake was only half listening. He was thinking about what Dr. Walsh had told him before he was brought here. She said his immunity might work both ways, that he might be able to disrupt Zaraneth's power completely. Jake had been watching the Karathi carefully since he arrived on their ship. He noticed that they all stayed a certain distance from each other, never touching casually the way humans did. Even Zaraneth kept space between herself and the other council members. Jake wondered if her power affected her own people too. While the council argued, Jake slowly moved closer to Zaraneth's ice throne. She was focused on the debate and did not notice him approaching until he was right beside her chair. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Jake reached out and placed his hand on her arm. "Testing something." The moment Jake touched her, something amazing happened. The ice throne began to crack. Frost that had been forming on the walls started to melt. The temperature in the room began to rise. Zaraneth tried to pull away, but Jake held on. "Let go of me," she screamed. But Jake could feel something flowing between them, like electricity but warmer. His immunity was not just protecting him from her power, it was actively canceling it out. Dr. Walsh had been right. The other council members stopped, arguing, and stared in shock. Jake could see fear in their ancient faces as they watched their leader's power being neutralized by a simple human touch. "Impossible," whispered ancient Kolthes. Jake finally let go of Zaraneth's arm and stepped back. The ice throne continued to crack and melt. Water began pooling on the crystal floor. "Not impossible," Jake said. "Just human." Zaraneth looked at her melting throne, then at Jake, then at her council members. For the first time since he had met her, she looked truly afraid. "Guards," she called out, "take the human back to his cell, and summon the fleet commanders. We need to discuss our options." As the Karathi warriors escorted Jake from the council chamber, he heard the arguing begin again behind him. But this time, it was different. This time, some of the voices sounded uncertain and worried. Jake was taken back to the holding room where Dr. Walsh was waiting. She looked up eagerly when he entered. "How did it go?" she asked. Jake sat down beside her and smiled. "I think I just started a civil war." Dr. Walsh raised her eyebrows. "What do you mean?" Jake told her everything that had happened in the council chamber. When he described how he had disrupted Zaraneth's power, Dr. Walsh's eyes went wide. "Jake, do you understand what this means? If you can neutralize her ability, you might be able to protect other people too. You could be like a shield against her power." Jake nodded. "But that's not the best part. The best part is that they're scared now. They're questioning everything they believed about themselves. Some of them want to stop the killing and find a new way. And the others? The others want to kill me and pretend this never happened." Dr. Walsh looked worried. "So what happens now?" Before Jake could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The crystal walls flickered with red light, and they could hear running footsteps in the corridors outside their cell. A young Karathi warrior burst through the door, speaking rapidly in his own language. He looked panicked and kept pointing toward the front of the ship. "I don't think he's here to guard us," Dr. Walsh observed. The warrior seemed to notice them for the first time. To their surprise, he spoke in broken English. "Human. Ice Toucher needs you. Big problem. Other ships coming." Jake and Dr. Walsh exchanged glances. "Other ships?" Jake asked. "What other ships?" The warrior looked around nervously, as if he was afraid of being caught talking to them. "Ships from homeworld. Ancient council not happy. They come to fix problem." Jake felt his stomach drop. Apparently news of his immunity had spread beyond this one ship. Now even more powerful Karathi were coming to deal with the situation. "How long before they arrive?" Dr. Walsh asked. The warrior held up his hand, showing 5 fingers. 5 hours. Maybe less. As the warrior hurried away, Jake realized that his small victory in the council chamber had just become a much bigger problem. The massive Karathi ships arrived exactly on time. Jake watched through the crystal walls of his cell as 12 enormous vessels surrounded the smaller council ship. Each one was 10 times larger than the USS Horizon and glowed with the same cold light as Zara Neth's throne. The young warrior who had warned them earlier returned to their cell, still looking nervous. Behind him came Lisvira, the council member with floating white hair who had spoken against continuing the killing. "The ancient council has arrived from our home world," Lisvira said in her thick accent. "They are very angry about what you have done. They say you must be destroyed immediately to preserve the natural order." Jake stood up. "And what do you say?" Lisvira looked around nervously, then stepped closer. "I say maybe the natural order needs to change. But I am only one voice among many. The ancient council has ruled our people for thousands of years. They will not listen to doubt." Dr. Walsh moved to stand beside Jake. "How many council members think like you do?" "Perhaps 4 or 5 out of 12 on this ship. But the ancient council has 50 members, all of them old and set in their ways. They see your immunity as a disease that must be cut out before it spreads." The ship shook as the massive vessels began docking procedures. Jake could hear the sound of many footsteps. In the corridors outside, marching in perfect rhythm. "They're bringing an army," Jake realized. Lisvira nodded sadly. 300 of our finest warriors, led by the ancient council themselves. They plan to execute you in front of all the survivors of our testing expeditions. They want to prove that even immune humans can die. Jake looked at Dr. Walsh, then back at Lisvira. "What about Zara Neth? Where does she stand in all this?" "She is confused and afraid. Your touch damaged more than just her throne. It damaged her confidence in herself and her power. She does not know what to believe anymore." An idea began forming in Jake's mind. It was dangerous and probably impossible, but it might be their only chance. "I need to see her," Jake said, "before the ancient council takes me away. Can you arrange that?" Lisvira looked surprised. "Why would you want to see her? She is the one who killed your friends." "Because she's the key to everything. If I can convince her that there's a better way, she might be able to convince others." The young warrior said something in the Karathi language. Lisvira translated. "Texmore says the ancient council will be here soon. If you are going to see Zara Neth, it must be now." 10 minutes later, Jake found himself standing in Zara Neth's private chambers. The room was even colder than the rest of the ship, and everything in it seemed to be made of ice that never melted. Zara Neth sat on a smaller version of her throne, staring at her hands. She looked up when Jake entered, and he was surprised to see that her ice-blue eyes were wet with tears that had frozen before they could fall. "Why did you come here?" she asked. "In a few hours, the ancient council will execute you. You should be trying to escape, not visiting your killer." Jake sat down on a chair made of crystal near her throne. "Because I think you're not really a killer. I think you're someone who's been told her whole life that killing is right. But deep down you know it's wrong." Zara Neth laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "You know nothing about me, human. I have destroyed entire civilizations. I have turned millions of beings into ice statues. I am exactly what I appear to be." "No," Jake said firmly. "You're what your society made you. But that doesn't have to be what you choose to be." Zara Neth stood up and walked to a window that looked out at the stars. "Do you know how I became the leader of my people? I was chosen as a child because my ice touch was stronger than anyone else's. I was raised from birth to believe that my power made me special, that it gave me the right to judge who lived and who died." Jake listened quietly as she continued. "For 300 years, I have led testing expeditions across the galaxy. I have watched thousands of species fail my test, and every time I told myself it was necessary, that we were keeping the galaxy safe from inferior beings. But you don't believe that anymore," Jake said. Zara Neth turned to look at him. "How can I? You proved that my power is not absolute. You proved that I am not the perfect judge I was raised to believe I was. If I was wrong about you, how many others was I wrong about?" Jake stood up and walked toward her. "It doesn't matter how many mistakes you made in the past. What matters is what you choose to do now. The ancient council will never allow change. They would rather destroy me than admit that our ways might be wrong. Then don't ask for their permission, Jake said. Lead by example. Show your people that there's a better way. Zaraneth shook her head. You don't understand, I'm just one person. The ancient council controls our entire fleet, our whole civilization. Every revolution starts with one person who decides to stand up, Jake replied. And you're not alone. Lysvira and others already agree with you. How many more would follow if you gave them the courage to speak up? Before Zaraneth could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The ancient council had finished boarding. It's too late, Zaraneth said. They're here. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors outside. Jake could hear many voices speaking in the Karathi language, all of them sounding angry and determined. Maybe. It's not too late, Jake said. Come with me to face them, stand up to them. Show your people that you're choosing a different path. Zaraneth looked at him for a long moment. Then, to Jake's surprise, she reached out and touched his hand. When nothing happened to either of them, she smiled for the first time since he had met her. You're either very brave or very foolish, Jake Martinez. Probably both, Jake admitted. They walked together to the main docking bay where the ancient council was waiting. Jake had thought Zaraneth looked old and intimidating, but the ancient council made her seem young and friendly by comparison. They were tall and thin like all Karathi, but their skin was so pale it was almost transparent. Their eyes glowed with cold fire, and the air around them was so cold that ice crystals formed and fell like snow. The leader of the ancient council stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice sounded like glaciers breaking apart. Zaraneth, first of the Karathi, you have failed in your duty. You allowed an inferior being to resist the ice touch. You have brought doubt and confusion to our people. You will step aside while we correct your mistakes. Zaraneth took a deep breath and stepped forward. Ancient ones, I request permission to address the council. There is nothing to discuss. The human will be executed, and testing will continue as it always has. No, Zaraneth said firmly. I will not allow it. The ancient council leader's glowing eyes focused on her with surprise and anger. You will not allow it? You forget your place, child. We are your masters. You are my elders, Zaraneth replied. But you are not my masters. And neither am I, the master of other species. The human has shown me that our way is wrong. Gasps echoed through the docking bay. The younger Karathi who had been watching looked shocked at Zaraneth's words. Some looked angry, but others looked thoughtful. The ancient council leader raised his hand and Jake could see frost beginning to form around his fingers. If you will not step aside willingly, then you leave us no choice. We will remove you from leadership. Try, Zaraneth said. The ancient council leader reached toward her. His ice-cold touch meant to freeze her instantly. But Jake stepped between them, grabbing the ancient alien's wrist. The moment Jake touched him, the ancient council leader's power began to fail. The frost around his fingers melted away, and the temperature in the docking bay began to rise. Impossible, the ancient alien whispered. Jake looked around at all the watching Karathi. Not impossible, just different. I can neutralize your ice powers, all of them. He released the ancient council leader's wrist and walked to the center of the docking bay. I have a proposal for all of you. Stop the testing, stop the killing. Work with other species instead of destroying them. Learn from them instead of judging them. And if we refuse? Another ancient council member demanded. Jake smiled. Then I'll make sure every species in the galaxy knows how to become immune to your powers. I'll teach them to defend themselves. Your age of terror will be over either way. The docking bay fell silent except for the sound of melting ice dripping onto the crystal floor. Jake could see the Karathi looking at each other, uncertainty in their ancient faces. Lysvira stepped forward from the crowd. I stand with Zaraneth and the human. Our old ways have brought us nothing but emptiness and fear. One by one, other young Karathi began stepping forward. Then some of the older ones joined them. Within minutes, nearly half of the assembled aliens had chosen to support change. The ancient council leader looked around at his divided people, his glowing eyes full of rage and confusion. "This is not over," he said. "Those who follow the old ways will not forget this betrayal." "Then they can leave," Zaraneth said firmly. "Take your ships and your followers and go. But you will not continue the testing under my authority." The Wairum, ancient council leader, and about half of the Karathi warriors left the docking bay, their footsteps echoing angrily in the corridors. Jake watched them go, knowing that this was not a complete victory. The galaxy would still have dangerous Karathi to worry about, but it was a beginning.